Hey everyone, Kristen from Made It Better Wanna Knits here today to talk to you about yarn, which I guess technically is pretty much what I'm always talking about on this channel, almost. But today specifically, I'm going to review some yarn for you. So I have 6 yarns that are new to me. Some of them are actually newer yarns, and some of them are just yarns I haven't had a chance to use yet. 2 of them I am actually already using in projects, so I'll be showing them to you in the projects. And 4 of them I just swatched specifically to make this video, because that is how dedicated I am to my viewers, swatching when I didn't have to.
Our hero.
But I wanted to try them out and be able to tell you about them. I don't have specific projects in mind for them, and in 2 cases I actually just bought 1 ball because I just wanted to try it out. So we got lots of between projects and swatches, lots of good concrete examples of how these yarns knit up, and I'm just going to give you my opinions of them and what I think they might be good or not good for in terms of knitting projects. So I'm going to start with the 2 that I'm actually already using. So the first is this one. This is Hobby Yarns Highland Wool. And I think I have to disclose that I was not given this specifically to review, but I was given it as a part of a campaign for Hobby Yarn. This is a DK weight yarn. It is 100% wool. There is no information beyond that about the wool. It just says 100% wool. The wool itself comes from Peru, but there's no breed information. It just says 100% virgin wool. So this is the, I want to say deep moss, but if I'm not correct, I'll put it here. It's something moss colorway, which is a nice dark green, but it really actually has a nice heathering to it when you look at it up close, which I know is harder to do on the camera. There. So you can see some yellows, some blues kind of in there, maybe a little brown. So it really does have some nice depth to the color. The yarn is 191 yards for 50 grams. That's almost a fingering weight. So it says DK. I would say this is more like a sport. The recommended needle is US 4 to 6, which again, maybe more like a sport or a light DK. And this is the project I am working on with this yarn. This is a new design, as you can see. Well, it might, depending on what you think it is at this point, it might look like it's made a lot of progress, but it actually is not. So this is sort of the very beginning of a double-sided, double thickness scarf that I am working on with tapered ends. So it either at this point kind of looks like a hat or maybe a really giant sock, and it is neither of those things. So as you can see, lots of nice cables in here, getting some good stitch definition. You can also kind of get a view of that more heathered color coming through. It is not the kind of stitch definition you are going to get with a very tightly plied superwash wool. It is just a little bit more rustic than that. It is not itchy, and it doesn't have, a lot of rustic yarns have more of a hairy look, and it doesn't have that. But the stitch definition is just a little bit more muted, which I think is fine for this project. There's still plenty of stitch definition. And of course, this is unblocked as well. So for this project, I am using a US 6 size needle, which is at the higher end of the recommended needle size. But because it is all over cables, you do want to use a larger needle size because your cables are already going to be pulling the stitches closer together. So they're not going to open up as much once you block. So I have been enjoying working with it. As I said, it is, I guess that's kind of hard to say, it is rather thin. So it's not going very quickly, but it's also not splitty. So I'm not having any trouble, for example, doing the cabling without a cable needle, which is what is making cable all over cable projects so much easier. It is easy to work with on the hands. As I said, it's not as soft perhaps as a superwash merino, but it is plenty soft to be working with. It's nice and squishy. It's very warm. I could certainly have this, you know, hopefully because it's a scarf, right next to the skin with no problem. So what kind of projects would I recommend this for? Scarves, obviously. It would certainly be on the thin side for sweaters. I wouldn't recommend it for anything that's got to be hard wearing. It doesn't seem like it's going to be super durable for that. It is rather loosely plied, even though the yarn itself is kind of a sturdier yarn. It's just Highland Wool is kind of a generic term, but it's not superwash merino. It's not a super soft yarn. So while the yarn itself, I think, is perhaps sturdier than a superwash merino, the construction of the yarn doesn't lead me to believe this would be good for anything hard wearing. So even though it is nearly the gauge, it is nearly the correct weight for socks, definitely wouldn't do socks with this. I think you could do a nice shawl or wrap with this as well. Probably not for lace, just because yarns that you use for lace projects in general should be a little bit more elastic, and that's not what you're getting here, again, because of the plying and the construction of the yarn. It's not a super, it's just not going to give you that nice stitch definition when you block it out. I think this would make a nice warm sweater if you were going for something a little bit more rustic, but again, it is on the very light side of DK, probably closer to a sport, and maybe even, you know, a heavy fingering. So I would not try to substitute this or use this in a pattern that called for a DK weight yarn. And in terms of, you know, a lot of fingering weight sweaters are actually knit at a larger gauge. I'm not sure how it would look with that, just because, again, it is a very loosely plied, and it might not give you the structure you need in terms of a sweater knit at a larger gauge. So if you wanted to use it for a sweater, I would definitely use it for a sweater that is calling for something like a sport weight. Probably not a fingering, not quite there. But so that is my first yarn to review for you. Again, this is Highland Wool. This is from Hobby Yarn. You can buy this online. Their shipping is really fast, given that it is coming from, I want to say Denmark, but somewhere over there. So it was here in less than a week, I think, which sometimes stuff in the US doesn't even come that fast. It is really reasonably priced. And they got a lot of sales and things over there, and like bulk discounts and all kinds of ways to get your yarn a little bit cheaper. So if you're looking for sort of a bargain and a nice, warm, still relatively soft wool, I think this is a good choice. I got my vaccine, my booster, and my flu shot today on the same arm. Does not feel great. But still, get vaccinated. Okay.
This public service announcement is over.
Yarn number 2. And this is what I think is a relatively new yarn. When I say new, I don't mean like came out last month, but I mean like maybe came out in the last year or 2. So this is And Make, which is a new line of yarns from the Fiber Company. And this one is their Aran weight. This colorway in particular is called Soft Love, in case you are interested in that. And it is a wool alpaca blend. I love wool alpaca blend yarns because 100% alpaca is so soft, but it has like no structure. That's just not the nature of the fiber. No matter how you ply it, it doesn't have the structure on its own for a lot of sturdy knitwear. It's good for weaving. which is really what they do more in places in the Andes where they have alpacas, because weaving is so tight. And you will notice if you see any hand knits from that region, from alpaca, they are usually very tightly knit. And that's because alpaca by itself just doesn't have the structure. And if you want it to be sturdy enough to last and to give your garments shape, you have to knit it very tightly on its own. But a wool alpaca blend is great because you're getting the softness from the alpaca and the sturdiness and the structure from the wool. So this is a fine blend of Peruvian Highland wool and alpaca made in Peru. It is 50-50, which is, I mean, personally, you know, I like to go 60-40 wool, just for a little bit more structure, but 50-50 is excellent. And it is an Aran weight, so the recommended needle size is 7 to 9. So this is a 100-gram ball, 164 yards. I bought this at Webb's, America's yarn store. I don't remember how much it cost, but it was pretty reasonably priced for the brand and for the fiber content. So let me show you how it's looking. It is definitely very, very soft. All right, so I am using this for my aisle pullover, which is not nearly as far along as I wish it was. All right, so this is obviously a top-down pullover with some nice geometric lines created along the raglans. So I don't know if you can see, there is a nice halo from that alpaca, but you will probably notice that the stitch definition, especially on this ribbing, is maybe not quite what I would want. It is not enough for me to trash the project. And I do have a swatch for this, and I just misplaced it. So otherwise I would be able to make more comments on how it looked after blocking. But it is a little, and again, with that alpaca, it is not quite as structured as perhaps would be ideal. But, you know, this is just a cozy pullover. It doesn't need a lot of structure. It's not, you know, it's not like a set-in sleeve garment that really needs that shape. Top-down raglan, seamless, isn't going to have much structure anyway. So I do wish the stitch definition was a little better on the ribbing. It looks nicer on the wrong side, to be honest. All right, so the needle size I am using here is, I want to say 9. No, it's 10. I'm using a US 10. So that is a little bit outside what was recommended on the yarn label. I did get gauge. And it looks, I think the stockinette looks great. But in terms of the ribbing, maybe it will change a little bit after blocking, but I don't 100% love it. It just doesn't quite look as sharp as I wish it did, but it feels lovely. I could certainly wear this right next to the skin. And that's going to be really important with this sort of higher neck. Definitely don't want that to be itchy, and it is not at all. It is nice and soft, really, and it is nice and drapey. So again, this is just sort of a casual pullover. It's not meant to have a lot of structure, so I think it will be very comfortable. I do think the stitch definition will sharpen up a little bit with blocking, but I would not probably use this yarn for something where I needed a lot of structure. For example, I don't know how it would do with cables. I would definitely put them on a much smaller needle size. You know, if I was trying to do, I think if I were doing cables with a US 10 needle in this yarn, it would look pretty sloppy. But in terms of feel, it feels, you know, great. It's been lovely to work with. It is not shedding a lot, which is another thing that is nice about the wool alpaca blend, is the wool kind of grips onto that alpaca, so you don't get as much shedding from the alpaca. And you can see it's not like a super, I don't know if you can, it's not like a super tightly plied yarn either. It is a rather loose ply. So not surprising there, I suppose. So what would it be good for? Loose, drapey sweaters that you're not expecting to have a lot of structure. I don't know, hats, I'm not sure, maybe a beret. Scarves, certainly, wraps, you know, anything that's going to be next to the neck because it's nice and soft. Obviously not socks, it's the wrong, it's the wrong weight. But as I said, they do have several other weights. I don't know if they've got a fingering weight. Definitely wouldn't use it for socks if they do. I think it might be nice for mittens and fingerless gloves, something that is just a smaller project, so you don't really need to worry about large swaths of fabric that are going to get too drapey and loose. But working on the US 10, it still looks okay, but I definitely, and as I said, I did get gauge, but I could see this maybe just having a little more structure if you did stick with the smaller needle sizes that are recommended on the label. So again, that is the Fiber Company and Make Erin. I did get this at Webb's. I don't know where else they sell it, probably directly from their website, but if you're in the US, Webb's is great because they've got volume discounts as well. So that is yarn number 2. All right, and for this next bunch of yarns, like I said, I am not even using them yet. I swatched with them just for you. A quick note, I steam blocked all of these for show. So I don't recommend steam blocking for swatches unless you are also going to steam block your finished garment. But in terms of getting a feel for the yarn and making the swatches lie flat, it worked very nicely. And I did that for 2 reasons. 1, I just got a steamer and I wanted to try it out. And 2, I was running out of time to get them blocked and make this video, so I didn't have time for wet blocking. All right, I'm gonna start with these 2 just because, let me tell you, I didn't realize this while I was working, but I somehow managed to swatch with 2 yarns that are almost identical, and I was quite concerned that I was going to mix them up. But they look a little more distinct on camera actually than they do in real life. I can tell, like looking at in the camera, I can tell which one is which. But looking at them like right next to each other, I wasn't 100% sure. All right, so we're going to start with this one. And again, I got enough of this for a sweater, but without a specific project in mind. So this one is Nitpicks Woolen Cotton. I realize you can't read the label because it's backwards. Anyway. And this is it's newer. I think it came out earlier this year. It is a wool cotton blend. This is a DK weight. This color is called Cedar Heather. It's really beautiful. And so 100 grams, 218 yards, which is on the heavier side for a DK weight. So again, like the last one, this is a 50-50 blend, merino wool and Pima cotton. And the recommended needle size is 5 to 7, which is a DK weight gauge. But again, the yardage would be a heavy DK weight. So here is my swatch. I swatched this on a US 6, and that does seem to be a nice gauge for this. It's not too open, but it's not, bulletproof either. You could definitely go a little looser. I don't know that I would go any tighter on the gauge for this. I didn't check my gauge because, as I said, I just steam blocked these for show, and I will always wet block my sweaters. And so that the gauge between a wet block and a steam block is not going to be the same. If in the future I want to use this yarn for something, I will re-wet block the swatch to get an accurate gauge. But I did use a US 6, and even with just a steam blocking, it has opened up a little bit. So it may be possible that with a wet block, it might open up even more, and then a smaller needle size would be appropriate. So this was wonderful to knit with. Cotton yarns can be tricky. They can feel rough on your hands. This is a wool cotton blend, and it's a merino wool cotton blend, so I think that really helps soften it up. So I had no problems knitting with it. It was not super splitty. I've got something stuck on it here. It feels like it has a cotton in it or a plant fiber in it. It doesn't feel like 100% wool, and it doesn't have the kind of drape that you would quite expect from a 100% wool versus cotton. So it is giving a little bit more structure, but it's not overly stiff like you would get with, like if you tried to cable with 100% cotton yarn, it can end up looking like just really stiff and uncomfortable. So I think here, again, you're getting a nice blend where your cotton is giving you some structure, some definition, but the wool is actually making that cotton a little bit softer. Obviously, it's going to give it warmth as well. It's nice and flexible, but again, cotton is making it a lot less drapey than a 100% wool would be. I did buy enough of this for a sweater. I think it would work well for a sweater. I probably wouldn't do it for a hat. Maybe some fingerless gloves or some, maybe fingerless gloves, mittens. You really probably want that 100% wool warmth. And again, it's a DK weight, so probably not for socks. And I'm not sure what kind of shawl it would make. A scarf, maybe. Again, in the times where you need those kind of warm accessories, 100% wool is probably usually what you're going for, but it might work for something like that as well. I do think for a hat, which just kind of in general, hats have like a softer look. I don't know that it would work for that. But lately, like those kind of pointy hats have been, as I whack myself in the face with this, those like little kind of cone-shaped hats have been popular. It might work well for that because it'll give you a little bit more structure and stand up a little nicer. But I do think it'll work for a nice sweater for late spring, early fall, times when we just can't do 100% wool anymore, but we still want a nice layer. So I think, probably folding it up into a garment, you might not actually be able to tell at first glance that it's not 100% wool, but I do think it's going to have just a little bit more crunch, which doesn't sound like the right word, but it's just not quite as soft and drapey as a 100% wool would be, but it's also not going to be so hot. It's gonna be a little bit more breathable, and a little bit less insulating if that is what you're looking for. So again, yarn number 3, woolen cotton from Nitpicks. Then the swatch that was almost the same. This is, I'm not going to pronounce this right, Sandness Garn Double Sunday. So the last 3 yarns that I'm going to talk about, I got all in the same place. Was it last month maybe? Or now it's December. So I guess in October at some point, I went up to Frederick to see my sister, and we stopped in Magpie Fiber's flagship store. And I'm going to put a photo in here because there I am standing in front of the window, and that is my sweater in the window. That is the Cunningham Falls pullover, which I didn't know anything about. I didn't realize they had it in the window, so that was a nice surprise. So we stopped in there, and obviously they have all the Magpie yarns, but they have some other yarns as well, and they have several of the Sandness Garn, lines, and I have been wanting to try those just because I've been seeing them everywhere, and they're not super cheap, but they're not as expensive as indie dyed yarn. So I wanted to see what they had and give them a try. And so I got this one and the next one I'm going to review just to try out. I only bought 1 ball and 1 ball of the other one. And Double Sunday is generally listed as a DK weight yarn. And the label says needle size 3.5 to 4, but I'm pretty sure that's not US. I'm pretty sure that's millimeters, and 4 millimeters is a US 6. So that is sort of a DK weight. And the ball has, just says 100% merino wool, 50 grams, 108 meters, which, Alexa, how many yards is 108 meters?
108 meters is about 118 yards.
118 yards, so that's on the heavier side for a DK weight. So most worsted weights come in around 110 yards, and DK weights usually in the 125, 130 range. So it's a little on the heavier side for a DK weight yarn. The English says 100% merino wool, but the German just says 100% wool. It is a non-superwash wool. This color, I don't know if it has a name. Double Sunday Sand is forest green. That sounds about right. And it is a really lovely green. And so here is my swatch. So I swatched on a US 6. This is pretty dense. I only did the steam blocking. I didn't do the wet blocking, but it's not given a lot of drape. And I think if I were to use this for something in the future, I would consider this maybe a little bit closer to a worsted weight. I don't think I would use such small needles on this. I think 6 is probably the lowest I would go. It just is not, it's just a little too dense and doesn't have enough drape on the US 6. This is how I remembered which swatch was which. When I was getting them confused, I put a double knot in here so that I would remember that this one was double Sunday and the other one was the wool and cotton. But overall, using it, very nice. As I said, the label, there seems to be a slight difference between the English and the German. Not that I speak German, but wool is wool, and it doesn't say merino. But it is very soft. I don't know if it's actually merino wool or what the deal is. It is a non-superwash, which I tend to like, especially for garments. Just they're a little bit sturdier and they don't grow, have a tendency to grow as much, although the colors can sometimes be more muted. And obviously they are not quite as easy care. Nice structure. You were definitely going to get some nice stitch definition out of this. Cables would be good. Really, and I just did the steam blocking, but the stitches ended up being just really nice and even. Just is a really, I don't know, I want to say like kind of like a workhorse yarn, which you don't usually hear with a merino wool. And obviously I just have a swatch. I don't have like a years old sweater to tell you how it's going to wear, but it just seems very sturdy, nice stitch definition. Is going to work for a lot of different things. Hats, mittens, sweaters, not socks again. Nice wraps, scarves. I think this is just going to be a very multi-purpose yarn and very soft and easy to work with. The price for this was, I want to say $11. $11 for 118 yards. So not super cheap, but not super expensive either. Don't know a lot of places where you can get this. I know there was one place I was considering ordering some of the Sandness Garn yarn from online, which was Wool & Company. But other than that, I don't know where it is sold online. It's got a nice ply structure. It's not super tight ply, but it's not super loose either. Overall, I think you're just going to get a lot of use out of this yarn for a lot of different kinds of projects. And I definitely would like to do something with this in the future. And the next yarn is also from Sandness Garn. This is Alpaca Wool. This is an alpaca wool yarn. So this one is dark heather gray. It is 65% alpaca, 35% wool. It doesn't have enough wool for me. It is too loose and drapey. It is too fuzzy. It looks nice, I think. It still has some good stitch definition, but working with this, it was so fuzzy. It was very splitty. It's not tightly plied. So I was originally, and I'm glad I got a chance to try it out. I was originally thinking about ordering this yarn for a sweater, and I'm really glad I didn't. I'm not going to say it won't work for any sweater, but for the sweater I had in mind, it would not work. It looks, I don't know, it looks just a little too undefined. It's very, because of all of the halo, it just looks a little bit blurry. Like the actual stitches, you can see they're nice definition, but I think with too much fuzz For example, if you work it up in cables, it would look too blurry. So as I said, 65% alpaca, 35% wool. It does not say what kind of wool in any of the languages. And this one is a worsted weight. So this says 3.5 to 5. A 5mm is a US 8. So this one's definitely more of a worsted weight. And I did knit this up on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on a US 7. And again, I think this is about as tight as I would go on gauge for this. I would ideally use a larger needle for this. It is a little bit dense, although again, it might open up a little bit with some wet blocking. But I have to say, of all the yarns I'm kind of reviewing today, this is the one I'm most disappointed in, just because, you know, I should have known it has more alpaca than I like in my sweater yarns, and I just don't see it as a good choice for the particular project I was kind of considering for. Now, for other projects, I think it would be great for hat, mittens, certain kinds of sweaters where you don't need a lot of structure and definition, something that's all stockinette, something that you kind of are going for that like fuzzy, rustic look. Great, it's gonna work great for that. But I just had a specific idea in mind, and it is not gonna work. I can't even remember what it was, to be honest, but it's definitely not gonna work for that particular style. But working with it, as I said, it was a bit splitty. It's not tightly plied. There's a lot of alpaca in it, so you're gonna have to maybe have some patience with it if splitting yarn is something that annoys you. But it is very soft. So it was very soft and lovely to work with. It's, you know, easy right next to the skin, no problems there. But I would describe it as a more casual yarn. If you're looking for something that's going to give you a finished garment or a finished accessory that looks very sharp, this probably isn't it, which is fine. It's good for other things. But it is soft, but it is not as soft as I would think with 65% alpaca, I gotta say. So I don't know what the wool is in there, but I would definitely, obviously I still have a whole ball of it that I can do something with, and maybe some fingerless mitts or something like that are going to be a good choice for this. So I'm sure it will get used eventually, but it is not going to be a sweater yarn for me. All right, and the last yarn I'm going to review for you is actually from Magpie, which is her Quartet fingering. Quartet is a newer yarn line of hers within the last year or so, I would guess. And I think it kind of replaces, she used to have domestic worsted, domestic fingering. I think it kind of replaces that, in that it's not as like soft and fancy as her Swanky DK, Swanky sock. It's a little bit tougher, it's a little bit sturdier. So it is 100% super fine, super wash merino, 200 yards, 50 grams. So it's a fingering, but it is definitely, I would say, a heavier fingering. This colorway is my favorite. This is called Wicked Game. This is like, I always buy this colorway from her when I am buying her yarn. So again, it is a fingering weight. It is not for socks. You don't want to try to use this for socks. It doesn't have any nylon in it. It doesn't have that kind of elasticity. But if you are a person that likes to do these fingering weight sweaters, I think that is where you're gonna, this is probably the wheelhouse for this yarn. So there's not a whole lot of other information to share. This is pricey. I mean, it's indie dyed yarn. So this is $18 a skein, $18, 200 yards. So if you need like 1,400 yards for your fingering weight sweater, then it's gonna get a little pricey. This did block up nicely with the steam blocking, but I used a US 4 here, and this is still a pretty dense fabric. So even though it is a fingering weight yarn, like I said, I really think that kind of the go-to for this are the fingering weight sweaters that are knit at a larger gauge, because at a US 4, this is still pretty dense, and I think if you are putting it on a 6, maybe even a 7, which a lot of designers are doing, that's really where this is going to shine. It is still quite nice here though. And you can see I just love this color. The definition, the dimension to this color here is beautiful. This is soft. It is not super soft. It is, the one thing I will say is that it seems at times, and not through the whole thing, but at times it seems a little overspun. And it's not causing any, trouble in the swatch itself. So it may just been bits here and there that looked a little bit overspun. But, even on a US 4, this is a hefty fabric. So definitely you can wear this right next to your skin. Plenty soft for that, and you cannot beat, I just love this color in particular, but she has so many beautiful colors. But if you are looking for not a sock yarn, but a sturdy fingering weight yarn for a sweater project in particular, I think this is a good choice. Also, if you were looking for a fingering weight yarn for color work, I think this is going to be a good choice. Maybe not for steeking because it is a superwash, but color work hats, color work yoke sweaters, mittens, I think it's going to be a good choice for that because the yarn is just not as slippery as a sock yarn, and those tend to not work as well for color work because you need the yarns to stick together to hold up those patterns. So I would love to think about this for a sweater in the future. Like I said, it's pricey. This would be a bit of an expensive sweater, but sometimes we splurge on these indie dyed yarns that we love. And I think this would be a good choice again for those fingering weight sweaters worked at a looser gauge. And I have a feeling that's really what she was going for with this yarn. So again, that's the quartet fingering, and she does have, there's worsted and maybe another one in there as well from Magpie Fibers in this colorway. Again, Wicked Game. I know I'm losing the light. We're getting some rain, but this Wicked Game colorway is my go-to. I absolutely love it. All right, those are all the yarns I have to review for you today. I hope that you found this video useful. I will include links to all of the yarns in the description box down below so that you can find them. The link to Nitpicks will be an affiliate link, and that is greatly appreciated if you click on that to do your shopping. So I get just a little bit of a kickback. If you found this video useful, I hope that you will give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Lots of great knitting and yarn related content here every week. New videos every Saturday. Next week's video is going to be about my whips. They're out of control. I don't know what to do and I need some help. So I hope you'll join me for that. Thank you again for joining me today, and I will see you soon in another video.